All right, we are going to get going. I know this is going to be a little loud with this microphone, but we are one of the live streaming sessions. And so being mindful that the microphone is important for all of our friends on Zoom. We're double live streaming right now. Well, we'll see how it all works. Thank you all so much for joining us in our session. We're excited to share some of the work that we're doing in our county, specifically around the idea of being the third side in special education conflict. So we'll start with some quick introductions. Here's our San Luis Obispo County SELPA team. I'm Amber Gallagher, the Executive Director of the San Luis Obispo County SELPA. This is my 6th year in this position. And prior to being a SELPA director, sort of my educational history is being a school psychologist and then moving up into special education administration.
Thank you. I'm Trisha Lomino. I'm a program specialist at SELPA and came over at the same time as Amber. So I've been there for 6 years. Prior to that, I was a high school special education teacher for 15 years. I have done a lot of work with alternative dispute resolution through these last 6 years. I have a husband with a learning disability. I have a child that struggles through school. So I definitely bring a parent lens to this as well, very empathetic, and realizing that parenting is very, very hard, and no judgment on any of the stories that I ever hear because I struggle on a daily basis.
I'm Lindsay Flatos, also with these gals at SLO County SELPA in California. About 20 years in education. I have a background in general education, preschool. I was a special education teacher. Now, one of my big roles at SELPA is facilitating many, many IEPs. I'm a trained mediator. One of the things I was thinking about when I wanted to explain my experience to you is also I'm the daughter of a parent with a high conflict personality disorder, as well as a parent who has trauma. So I grew up in this space. And thank you, sorry. And also I'm a parent of a child with a disability. So coming into this space, that is my background.
All right, back to Amber.
We're going to do the fun mic passing. And so we stand before you sharing really our journey, our learning that we've done over the course of the past several years since we've really leaned into expanding our ADR continuum within our SELPA. But by no means do we stand here and profess to be experts in this space. We are constant learners and growers and really just work hard to build our own skills and our own capacity to support our families and our school districts within our county. So quickly for us, it's always nice to know who's in the room. So who are educators in this space? Awesome. Mediators, hearing officers, state agency folks, anybody else? Parent center, awesome. Okay, that's helpful to us, so thank you. So San Luis Obispo County, where are we in California? We are on the Central Coast. You can see here the little red square, kind of smack between San Francisco and Los Angeles, a little bit southern than that. 4,000 square miles within our county, though. So geographically, as the SELPA, we serve a huge range in terms of where our families are located and where our supports are needed, and lots of diversity within the demographics within those 4,000 square miles. We have over 32,000 students, 75 schools, and 13 school districts, which include 10 actual school districts, 3 charter schools, and a county office of education. Furthermore, we have 5,500 students with disabilities. So for those of you who might not be from California, a quick overview of what is SELPA. SELPA is Special Education Local Plan Area, and it's a structure specific to California where California was split into a bunch of geographical regions to serve and support students with disabilities due to size and scope of the state. There are 132 of us across the state, all with varying structures of governance. So there are single district SELPAs, meaning that the SELPA is also a very large school district, one in the same. There are multi-district SELPAs like ourselves in San Luis Obispo County, where one SELPA, but we serve and support 14 school districts. And then there's a variety of structures within kind of those two realms. And as a SELPA association, our collective mission is to champion educational success, opportunities, and access for our students with disabilities. Here locally in San Luis Obispo County, SELPA, our mission is to be capacity builders, facilitators, and connectors for students, families, and member districts within one statewide coherent system of support in which all students are provided inclusive opportunities for continuous improvement, especially those students farthest from success. And I've highlighted the idea of capacity builders, facilitators, and connectors because it really is those three spaces that we lean into when we think about our work with alternative dispute resolution. So quickly today, we are going to talk about some of what we believe are our core pillars of the work we do in ADR. That's leaning into the third side of conflict, and then also grounding ourselves in adaptive leadership as sort of a core tenet or pillar of our ADR work. Also, we're going to walk through utilizing a case study to show how our process of how we navigate ADR here at the SELPA, and then we're going to end with just a quick journey of our transformation and the work that we're doing in building and enhancing and providing supports for our families and schools along ADR. All right, so hopefully this book, everybody has seen it, possibly read it. We've read it a million times over. It's one of the books we often case study on our team, but it is The Third Side by William Ury. And Ury really speaks to this idea that there is a third side within every conflict. There's not just two parties. There's this idea of a community that has great influence and impact over the outcomes of that conflict. And that third side, the community, can be a variety of different roles and people to support that conflict. So for us, it could be mediators, it could be advocates, it could be the students themselves, it could be certain IEP team members. We often take the role as SELPA as a third side. All people who have been identified as somebody who has a vested interest in supporting the well-being of the student, but also somebody who understands and can navigate the system in which that student exists in. So it is this shift. It's that two-party, shifting from that two-party, us versus them, right versus wrong, to this idea that we are here with collective interests and we can move beyond a two-party system to this idea that we can collaboratively work together to overcome conflict. So we all know why conflicts exist. It can exist for a variety of reasons, and then really what that relates to within special education. So conflict can escalate due to unmet frustrated needs, poor skills, weak relationships, conflicting interests, disputes over rights, that unequal power or power imbalance, relationships that maybe they're not weak, but they've been injured, or lack of attention, lack of limitations, or a lack of protection or feeling of safety. And within special education, that can play out in a variety of ways for a variety of reasons, right? We get disagreements over the design of services. We get disagreements over the actual delivery of services. There's relationship issues. There's lots of communication issues. And then there's overall sort of systemic and legal factors, right? We always say that special education is ripe for conflict because there's constant tension between this feelings and emotions and desires for students to be successful, and then a really quite rigid legal system that kind of butts up against that idea around being able to be creative and flexible and innovative in space. And so we try to capture how do we work within that to leverage things that we know can solve problems, but in a system that actually presents itself as quite rigid at face value. And Yuri has, within the book, Yuri really talks about that the role of the third sider, that community, can be one of 10 things, or lots of 10 things, or any of these 10 things at the same time. And so he presents this idea of the third sider could be a provider within the space. It could be, this person could be a teacher, they could be a bridge builder, a mediator, an arbiter, an equalizer, a healer, a witness, a referee, or a peacekeeper. And I think what it took us some time to understand was that any situation as a third sider can call you to be any of these 10 things in the same conflict situation. So you don't just show up in one way. You may have to initiate yourself as a bridge builder, and then you might end up turning into a mediator along the way and a referee. And so any sort of situation can call us to show up as any of these 10 roles over the course of time. Yuri speaks to these roles sort of existing in 3 categories, this idea around prevention, resolution, and containment. And for us, we really try to spend our time in that idea of prevention as third siders. So if we are providers, if we are those people who can address unmet needs of either party, the parents or the school, if we show up as teachers and can address the lack of skill that either party may have, or if we show up as bridge builders to be able to bridge weaker relationships between both parties, then our work is to dig in and address the root conflict, or the root causes of those conflicts, to prevent them from happening time and time again. If we're existing within that resolution phase, then really our role as a third sider is to help parties find common ground, repair relationships, and problem solve around what that conflict might be. And if we're showing up as and addressing sort of the containment of conflict, at that point, we're really just trying to not allow the conflict to get any worse or the situation to become any more unsafe than what it already is. So for us, while we spend most of our time in the prevention category, at any time we're assessing what we need to be, what type of third sider we need to be within that given case. The other sort of core pillar or tenet that is foundational to our ADR journey is the idea of adaptive leadership. And so Ronald Heifetz said you need perspective both on yourself and on the system's context to understand how you operate as a leader within that context. And so it's this iterative process as a leader to constantly be observing, constantly be interpreting what you are observing, and then intervening based upon that observation and interpretation of what you're seeing. And it's quite iterative, that process. So you have to be both a diagnostician and understand and know how to sort of diagnose what you're seeing, but also you have to be an action-oriented leader to then act upon what you're diagnosing. So adaptive leadership is, what do you do with that action? As an adaptive leader, it's the practice of being able to mobilize people within that space to tackle tough challenges and thrive. So that is truly what we see ourselves as. We are the adaptive leaders, the third siders in a conflict, to say, how do we, it's not on us to solve people's problems, but how do we mobilize and support the team of people working within the context of that problem to be able to solve their own problem? So as adaptive leaders, according to Heifetz, some of those key concepts are getting on the balcony, being able to get above the system and look within the system to identify, like, how do you get out of the weeds, look from above, and be able to, again, sort of diagnose what's happening in a really systemic way, because we can sit, as you guys know, and tackle one issue at a time, but the overall system oftentimes is what we actually need to address. So how do we get on the balcony? How do we identify those adaptive challenges from the technical challenges? Technical challenges are those things that's like compliance driven procedural issues. Those things are easy to identify and easy to correct in a sense. But really, how do we identify those adaptive challenges, the things that are more substantive in nature, that are relationship driven, emotional driven? And then in doing that, it's our job as leaders to be able to regulate distress, live in that land of discomfort and be okay with it, but also know how to lead people through it and understand that there's this obligation to regulate how people feel within distressed or and unsafe environments. Also maintaining disciplined attention and ensuring, I love this one, protecting the leadership voice from below. So how do we really ensure that everybody at that IEP table or everybody involved in that conflict has space and safety and an opportunity to have a voice in part of the problem solving and solution? It's not just what the principal has to say or just what the special ed director has to say, but really how do we elevate all the voices from within? Specifically, how do we empower that parent voice at the table? So adaptive leadership is all about focusing on the environment in which the problem exists. Again, that relationship between what he calls the leaders and the followers, but really that power dynamic between everybody at the table, and then the delicacy of the interactions that occur within the conflict. So there's so much we like these two foundations because for us there's so much alignment within them. Both concepts, Yuri's third cider and Heifetz's adaptive leadership, speak to the idea of empowerment. How do we empower people that are directly affected by the challenge or conflict to find their own solution? It's not for us to find the solution, it's to empower them to do that work themselves. It's that idea around taking a systemic view, right? How do we shift the perspective to see how problems are interconnected and deeply rooted in the system's values and beliefs? Both models are about people doing the work for themselves and not having somebody else do the work on their behalf. And then they both focus on process over outcomes. So it is about how do we lean into the process of getting through a conflict versus just imposing a final decision or having somebody impose a final decision to say, this is how you're going to overcome it. Our two big questions when we take a step back and think about how these core pillars impact us, it leads us to two big questions. One is always, what is the situation calling us to be? So conflict occurs with our parents and our school districts. We get involved in a case and we ask ourselves, what is the situation calling us to be as third-siders, as the SELPA support? And what can I do for this team that they have not yet been able to do for themselves? Right? So how do I need to show up and how do I need to be in this case? And what can I do for them that they yet can do for themselves? Therefore need a third side supporter. So we're going to take all of that information and sort of show you how we process through a case within our SELPA as being the third sider. So the context of our case is this. We're going to tell you about a case that we supported with a 5th grade student named Sophie. She has initial eligibility within 1st grade in special education under specific learning disability and other health impairment. Her current IEP direct services include both a model of push-in SAI and pull-out SAI. She's got some occupational therapy direct services monthly in an unknown setting on the IEP. So not very prescriptive. She's not making progress on her goals, and the family has obtained an advocate to support. For us, our ADR process starts. So here's where we transition into kind of the nitty gritty of what it looks like in slow SELPA. So the parents call our main office line, and we use locally a general, very structured process. We use a general call log. We have a process map so that every single time a call comes in, we process that call the exact same way. And then a program specialist will call the parent back when time allows. And for us, when time allows, it's not because we don't want to take a cold call, but it's because sometimes that case needs 30 minutes. Sometimes that case needs an hour, and 5 minutes is not going to cut it, in that initial phone call. So we have a limit of, we will call you back within 24 hours, oftentimes within a couple hours. But we really do want to make sure that these two ladies specifically, when they make that call, they have the right mindset and the framework going into that phone call so that we can be as supportive as we possibly can. So we spend time listening, offering suggestions to try for that parent to go back to the school district and try. We call the parent to ensure that they know that this concern has been brought forth. And then we always tell the parent, call us back, go try this and call us back if it doesn't work out or if you need additional support. So we try to do some initial empowerment of parents, and then and hope that works. Hope that works. Sometimes it doesn't. And for us, we call that conferencing. Here's just an example of what those resources look like. These are all available. Most are available on our website. But again, you'll see this is our structured process map for taking in phone calls. I know you can't actually see it, but it's a really routine structured process of how we handle those phone calls. This bottom row right here is just all the information that we collect on that incoming call, so we can be prepared. Yeah.
Is this true for all SELPAs or
just ours? Just ours. Yeah. Yeah, I would say most SELPAs absolutely have they all have structures in place for how this works. But in terms of, this exactly. Yep. Great question. In a year, we probably get, so parent specific, 200 to 250 incoming parent calls, roughly 100 to 150 agency calls that call us on behalf of parents. So I would say 400 on average a year between, the two. Yep. So that's just an example. So I'm sorry.
People are not as concerned around confidentiality, or I just know that within different communities, sometimes it's hard to reach out around things. And so within our agency, like, we don't do an intake per se. And I'm just curious how that works. I know everyone's different, but I saw a lot of kind of initial questions, just from what I could see on the thing, initial questions that are, start to ask more personal information. And so I'm just curious if you have any barriers around that, especially with the current times.
Yeah. So the initial intake, when we call them like our mainline calls come in, is it's very basic information. It's district, it's grade, it's why are you calling the SELPA? Sometimes we get long-winded answers. Sometimes we get really short-winded answers. But what that really does is it helps them, whatever information that we're able to gather, it helps them when they go to make that phone call. But obviously too, if a parent calls and wants to not share anything at that time, we're totally respectful of that as well. Sometimes we'll have parents, we generally always take the approach of, we're going to let the district know, because our role is not to hold this confidential information. Our role is to help both parties resolve the conflict. And, but sometimes, every now and again, a parent will say, I really don't want you to call the district. Okay, that's fine. And so we're also super respectful of that. Here, and then.
Can you give us an example of your role when you guys are at an IEP, of how you guys present yourself when the parents and the district? Because oftentimes I've seen SELPA say that we are neutral and we can't be on either side, and the parents don't feel supported.
I'm going to defer that only because we will get there.
Do you get calls from districts?
Do we get calls from districts? Absolutely. Less though. I will say less. Normally it's us telling the district, hey, we're here to help you, whether you want that or not. We're coming in because this is a concern. But yes, I mean, we do, but definitely get more calls from parents and more calls from community agencies that are supporting parents and getting the parents connected to us. Or calls from advocates saying, hey, I've got this case. We want your help. Yeah.
So I know our state is like very voluntary, right? Like if we're involved and it's located, meaning both parties have to agree. So it sounds kind of like if a parent calls, it's not voluntary, it's supposed to decide that you're going to do, right? That's the part.
Yeah, so this is all what we call conferencing. So there's lots of voluntary nature to it. There's we try to solve as much as we can in our lowest level of intervention, but when it does become when we become involved in facilitation, which is the case, which is the case study, that does require both parties to consent to us being there. I will say we have never, in the 6 years we've been doing this, we have never had a case where if the incoming is a parent phone call who's requesting support and we go to the district and say, we really feel like you need SELPA facilitation. We've never had a case where the district has said no thank you to that. Normally they're quite open to it, whether they think they need it or not, but they're very open to us being involved in the case to help them solve the problems. So 2 weeks, for this particular case, we tried to solve it via conferencing. We tried to empower the parents, give them some information, went back to the district. It didn't work, obviously, and the parent called us back a couple weeks later, filled out our ADR request form. I received those requests of the SELPA director, and then I assigned them to program specialists based on capacity, based upon presumed needs of the case, depending on how much information we have, and then area of expertise. So over here, Tricia has spent a lot of time in secondary education. And so if it's a high school case that's coming through and she's got some capacity, most likely she's going to be the support on that case, where Lindsay has spent a lot of her career with early learning and elementary. So it just kind of depends. To the extent possible, we try to match the cases based upon need to the staff. So now the case is sitting with a program specialist. So I'm going to pass it over and then they're going to walk through what this process looks like.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to kind of walk through what does our process look like for you without being too long-winded, because it is quite the process. So this is kind of the overview, the structure of it. We get the call from the parent. We engage in active listening. We seek clarity. We ask a lot of questions because we're really trying to dig in and get to the specifics of what the problem is. And then we determine what the case needs. So we don't have a prescriptive, you call, you get a facilitated IEP. So we have a continuum where we're working through a process to determine what is this situation calling me to be? What do I need to be for this team and for this parent? So with that seeking clarity, so we've already done kind of an initial conversation with the parents 2 weeks prior. So we have a general understanding, but this is our opportunity to dive in deeper. These phone calls can go from 30 minutes to an hour. They could come into the office. It could be over the phone. So there's lots of different ways that we can do this with a parent. It just depends on what they prefer and what feels supportive to them. I've done Google Meets, Zooms, all those kind of different things. So with this, we have our little chart here, and this is kind of what we chart out, and we'll show you an example of what a filled in one looks like. But as we're going through this conversation, we're really trying to identify what are those concerns, what are they requesting, what possible agenda items, if we are going to facilitate potentially as we're going through this, identifying like what are those things that we need to make sure that we hit and we are focused on. And then what are further questions that we have for them? You know, what are we still unclear about? And so really, did anyone do the coaching one? Was that yesterday? Okay. So it is a lot of coaching right in the very beginning. It's trying to narrow their questions, trying to get to a specific thing, right? And trying to identify emotions, trying to find like, what is that core thing? What is that? A lot of times they'll say, I'm really upset about the amount of minutes that they have with services. As we dive in deeper and deeper, that's not actually what it is. It's a whole different area. So this first conversation, or actually this is our second conversation, is really, really important, and we spend a lot of time, energy, and focus on it. So then our next steps after being able to identify these different things with the parents, we then call the district. So we find out who is that point person. It could be the special ed director, it could be a coordinator, it could be the teacher. We need to identify, and a lot of times the parents will help us identify that as well. Like who's a trusted person for them on that IEP team? Who have they been communicating the most with? Who maybe already knows the concerns? So those are the people then we are reaching out to so we can see the other side. As we know, as a third sider, there's two sides to every story, and we're trying to gain a complete picture. No judgment in any of this. It's really us just listening and taking and trying to narrow down what we're finding. Trying to see that whole picture. So after we have these two conversations, then we really try to determine what can I do for the team that the current team has not been able to do for themselves. What needs to happen here, right? Is it I need to come in and facilitate this meeting? Is it I need to focus on IEP process, compliance? What we just don't know, right? So that's what we're trying to narrow down. What type of third side support does this case need? And then what does this case need based on our continuum? And I believe that's my next slide. So this is what our continuum looks like. And we've been building this out for the last 6 years. Before that, we had an ombudsman and decided that it was really important for us to do the work. We are connected with our districts and our families. We have training and the skill to do it, so we should do it. And so these are the different things. So we have that conferencing that we mentioned. A lot of times we can stay right in this zone. I have parents that have been calling me for several years, couple times a year, and that's adequate. Right? That's good for them. They're empowered to go and do the work. Conferencing is great. SELPA coaching. So when a parent is interested in showing up differently to meetings, they want to know more about their rights and how they can be present and advocate on behalf of their child. Coaching is great. Then we have IEP process support, which we're supporting the entire process. So we're looking at paperwork, we're working with the teams, we're looking at their meetings, we're looking at implementation, we're helping the parents better understand. So we are supporting the entire process. Then we have the facilitated IEP, which I think we all very much understand, and we're going to talk a little bit how we differ a little bit on that. And then we do local resolution. Amber does our local resolution. And then, of course, there's always the option of OAH, resolution, mediation, and hearing. So quite a few things to be able to capture there. So with this case scenario, after all of these discussions and talking to people and trying to see the big picture, this is what was identified. The team lacks thorough preparation for meetings. Parents feel they are not being heard when they're in that IEP meeting, even outside of it. Parents feel there's no follow-up to agreed upon actions, so things are discussed and dropped and not followed through. School team feels the advocate is verbally aggressive in the meetings, and 2 IEP meetings have been held with no resolution. So based off of this, we have decided that a facilitation is going to be the best way forward, and so we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like for us.
All right, let's facilitate this meeting. I know there's a lot of mediators in here, but we'll go with facilitation, so the teamwork. Oh, can you hear me? Thank you. Okay, so let's prepare for this.
Ooh. So who are we having conversations with? In Sophie's case, we know there's an advocate. We're speaking with the advocate. We're speaking with the parent potentially. In this case, yes. Special education director and program coordinator in this case. And then what questions are you asking in that investigation that Tricia was talking about? Are we asking the right questions? I know we learned a little bit about this yesterday. I heard you say, can you tell me a little bit more about this? So we have some sample questions that will be in the PowerPoint too, just some sample investigation questions, lots of tell me more. What would that look like if? Because we can uncover some of those gaps when we're doing those conversations. And then also, have I gained insight on all of the various perspectives? There's many people who are going to be at the IEP table. Is there anyone that maybe I haven't spoken to? That OT that we had talked about in the beginning, do I need to also gain perspective from them before we go into this meeting? So really checking in on ourselves for that. And then are there timelines or any follow through needed? In Sophie's case, her mom was very concerned about there not being follow through or items not being followed through on, but also not having documents ahead of time doesn't help her prepare mentally for the meeting. So how is that third sider or facilitator? How am I going in and maybe supporting this team and getting things to them earlier enough so the family can participate in this meeting? So I visually, what I think about it, a little bit of that grid that Tricia shared on her slide that we'll show you in a minute, is how they all connect. So in effective IEP preparation, we, if you can't tell by now, we overly prepare for all of our meetings that we go into because they seem to go better. And while we're communicating and connecting with all of who we feel like at the time are the right people, we're also identifying those meeting norms, and we're also coming up with ideas for how to build the agenda. So maybe the parent has identified an area of concern, or there's that so-called elephant in the room. Maybe it doesn't follow the agenda of an annual IEP meeting, but we know this needs to be talked about. So we're jotting that down on our grid so that we're really going to go into the meeting having an effective conversation. When we're preparing for the norms, in that prep work, what have I identified? I'm hearing folks start to share with me that they're terrified to go into this meeting with this particular advocate. So I'm listening for that. So what does that look like in my meeting norms? I'm sure you guys all have this, but I have these stock norms that really work for me, but it's not really about me, it's about the team. So what are some of those norms that maybe need to be shifted for this case? So in the conversations, what I'm learning is that there needs to be safety in this space, but safety for all, including that advocate that maybe is perceived as difficult, but he's of value, and so are all the team members there. So how can I do that, and what do the norms need to be so I can be the person helping that team with what they haven't been able to do for themselves? So it's really hard to tell, I think, on this slide. We tried highlighting some of the ones, but I realized that where it says use a polite tone, it's like a soft yellow there. Polite tone, I guess, in Nina's session yesterday, I was thinking about it. Polite to one person might be polite to another. But in general, using a polite tone was something that we came up with in Sophie's case, as well as allowing time to review the actions and agreements prior to the end of the meeting, and clearly identifying who is going to do what and by when. So those in particular were things that I really wanted to focus on in the norms. It's okay to have difficult conversations. How are we having those conversations in a polite way? So these are ever changing, and I do adjust my norms case by case, depending on who's coming to the table. So I know that this is hard to see, but this is our sample planning grid. So in Sophie's case, what it really looks like is actually terrible handwriting all over a piece of paper that has these grids on it, but we typed it up for you. So parent is telling us that she's concerned that Sophie isn't making progress in reading. She's not being heard at these meetings. They're making many, many verbal agreements at the IEP table, but the things aren't happening. They're not being followed through. Staff aren't trained in this specific dyslexia curriculum, and her list goes a little bit on. But she didn't tell us this in this very clearly articulated form. She's sharing this information kind of all over the place, and rightfully so. There's high emotions involved. So what we do with this grid is we utilize the grid to share or to help us compartmentalize. I know I need to figure out what is this specific interest or what is this request? Am I hearing her current concerns correctly? Is there anything that I really want to make sure goes on the agenda? Yes, it might be an annual plan review meeting, but there's this elephant in the room that's causing this team to not move forward. Am I hearing that? Do I need to get that on the agenda here? And then, of course, a spot for norms when I'm hearing, oh, my staff are terrified to go to this meeting with the advocate. Okay, what can I do to help create safety in that space? And then I always leave a part on the grid for questions, is there any little things I need to follow up with? There's a private company in California, it's a reading company. It's called Linda Mood Bell. I don't know if anyone's familiar with. Oh, okay. Okay, great. Universal. Okay, good. Sorry. Parents, the child's making progress in that program and wants the district to fully fund it. This is kind of in the other. Am I having this conversation with the special ed director? And so I'm just jotting all of these things down on my grid because there's a lot of pieces in this case. What can I do for this team that they haven't been able to do for themselves? So I'm using this grid to help me with that. So in our agenda build, we have an agenda template that we use. Feel free to steal it or ignore it completely, whatever works for you. But one of the questions that I ask in my investigation, and I always get an answer to this, but sometimes we have to sort through it. What do you need discussed at this IEP meeting to leave feeling settled? And it could be different for the district and it could be different for the parent, and that's okay. But I have to know that answer. What are your top priorities? Because I don't know if you guys experience this, but people like to plan IEP meetings for 1 hour. Well, when they're facilitated and when you actually have conflict, that's not real. That's not long enough. So we need to have some conversations around that. I guess that's separate. But what do you need to leave feeling settled? And so sometimes that can help this long laundry list from the parent or the advocate or even the school district on what they would need. How can I see what aligns and put certain things at the top so we can at least, if we have to come back for multiple meetings, come to the next meeting feeling like, okay, we got somewhere, we made some progress. Are there any non-negotiables? So just finding out what that might be. And then using those identified gaps. I think I touched on this a little bit, but a lot of times as we're doing the grid, there's gaps in connection, whether it's communication or pieces of information that you can't see has happened in the notes or in the meeting, but you start to hear some trends that there might be a gap in something here. So just kind of listening for what that might be has also been supportive, because then you can identify those gaps and bring them out in the agenda or at the meeting for those conversations. So we were kind of talking about preparing for the meeting, but then prepping for the meeting to us is a little bit different because now we're really narrowing that focus. So we're going from sort of that big picture, communication, connection, all of that. Now let's get a little bit more detailed in prepping for the meeting. Also very, very important. So we have our team has a facilitated IEP meeting checklist. And it goes from 1 to 2 weeks prior, all the many things that we do to keep us organized and on track. And then also we go into what are we doing the day or two before, all the way down to the day of. So what is that final pre-meeting communication? Are the agendas finalized and they're sent to all members of the IEP in order to create safety? Yes. Oh, well, I don't know what I was going to say. So go. It varies. The cases with, I would guesstimate, because they do vary, 5 hours of prep. Does that sound right? In total, 5 to 10 hours. It's a lot. Yes. But if I do all this, the meeting, it goes much better. So all of that, the 5 hours to 10 hours, whatever it might be, depending on what the conflict is, how long they've been in conflict, I can go into that meeting and have more success. Yeah. So what I do so I'll use just Sophie's case, for example. So I send the agenda, the draft agenda, to the advocate and the program coordinator in that case, and just ask them to review it, and they'll share like if that meets their needs, because I do it on both sides. Then they'll get it back to me. I'll redo like whatever the tweaks were. Here's the second review. I'm ready to send. Once I get the okay, I send it to all team members. Oh, honestly, the full team finally probably only gets it a day or two before, because to be frank, like the school districts and the advocates aren't getting back to me as quickly as I would love that. But so in this case, that's what happened. But yeah, I think going into it a day or two before, as long as all of the parties have at least seen it, there's still been enough safety in that. Okay. And then this is really silly, but not silly. Meeting logistics confirmed and the space confirmed. The amount of times, and I don't know if you've experienced this, okay, there are going to be 17 people in this meeting. Why are we in a very tiny space with no air conditioning? Everyone's already in conflict, but the person at the front office doesn't necessarily know that. So in this case, what can the team not do for itself? What do I need to go in and do to support them? Even with those little things, folks are really overwhelmed. So can I even support them with that? Hey, we're gonna have 17 people in this meeting. What kind of space do we have? And then all the way to how the furniture is arranged. So all of those details are on our checklist so that we don't forget. The last thing, well, I'll say it later.
She'll say it later. Okay. And so about the time, like how much time does it take to prep? It really depends on each one, especially if you've had a prior relationship with them as well. So if we've already been involved with the team, it's a much quicker process. Like we're not spending as much time, but on new cases, yes, it does take a lot more time. Okay, so for facilitating the IEP, we really think about how are we showing up. So Lindsay and I do a lot of work on ourselves on how can we show up, how can we be what this team needs to be. And that means that we need to come in with a particular vibe, it really is a vibe, a tone, and how are we greeting people? How are we making sure that it doesn't feel like we're sitting down at the table with the school team when the parent walks in, all of those things. So we're like thinking about optics too, right? Making sure everyone's feeling safe, going to the front office, greeting the parent, walking them back to the room, but making sure the room's already set up, the team set up, ready to go, right? And walking in with the parent. So really thinking about like these dynamics and how can we make sure that it feels better, it feels good, right? It does not feel good walking in and everyone's sitting there, including the facilitator, and the parent's like, oh, hi, everyone, right? So how are we greetings, making small talk? The room is set up, things are already printed, ready to go. So just want to start things off in a really, really positive tone. And so we put a lot of time and thought into that. And so then we also want to make sure that we're clarifying our role. We understand that we're not neutral. We really aren't. There's no way for us to be 100% neutral. We are human beings. And so making sure that we are identifying that we are here to help people work through conflict on the behalf of the student. I do not say I'm here as a neutral party. Right? I always say I'm here to help everybody work through conflict on behalf of this student so that we can come to some sort of agreement and that we can work on our relationship. I really try to avoid the word neutral. And then again, these are all the things that I'm going to be doing throughout this time, including with being confident, right? Inside my heart might be like going a million miles per minute. And I might be like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? How am I going to pivot? But I need to be projecting confidence and calm and composure throughout that entire time. We use a lot of visuals. I'm going to show you that in a minute. It really, really helps the team. And it also makes things very transparent for them. Feels like they're part of the process. Everyone's part of the process. And then, of course, make sure we start on time. So here are what some of the visuals that we use in our meetings, and we're trying to get teams to do these outside of facilitated as well. Needs to be a focus. So we use poster paper, love poster paper. If there's a whiteboard, that works as well. So just depending on what your space is, but these are the things that we capture. So we capture those action items. And for this particular case, the parent said they don't follow through on what they say they're going to do. So this is going to be even more important. But what I have found after teaching for 15 years is that these meetings are really long. I can't remember what I agreed to in the first 20 minutes of the IEP meeting. Right? It's very taxing mentally. And so capturing these, everyone's on the same page. We're good to go. We've captured them. Our norms, we can refer back to them without being too aggressive, right? Like, I just want to point everyone back to our norms, make sure that we're following these. It's a great, point to move people forward, right? Agreements. Sometimes you're only going to agree on maybe one goal that whole entire IEP meeting, but shoot, I'm going to celebrate the heck out of that. We agreed to a goal, right? So capture the agreements, capture those things, like we're doing hard things, but we're making progress. And then the parking lot. That is, I let parents know this is not a place where your questions go to die. This is not on our agenda, and we're going to make sure that these are part of our action items, but we need to make sure that we're getting to all the things that we need to get to today. That's you, my dear.
Thank you. Okay, the opener. This is fun. This is when I can awkwardly practice this on my drive to the IEP meeting. What am I going to say and how are they going to perceive me? But it's really, really important is how you're showing up and what is your first impression. So for me, I have to practice it. You might not be that person that has to practice, but you're going to share your name, a little bit about your background, and maybe you adjust that depending on who you know is going to be in the space. Because as you know, we do 5 or 10 hours of pre-work. So we have an idea who's going to be in these meetings, and really provide that clarity around your role. I'm not here as a decision maker in the IEP meeting today. A lot of people for us at SELPA, it's like, oh, well, SELPA and SELPA is the experts. Well, that's not my role today. I'm monitoring the agenda. I'm managing the meeting norms. I'm going to help you have those difficult conversations. And then something I always like to call out is to be really clear. Conflict is scary for so many people, maybe because I grew up in conflict. I think it's something that I don't know if comfortable is the right word, but I've just been around it a lot, but I have to know that it's not that way for everyone. So an example of something I might say would be, there might be hard conversations or emotions in the meeting, and that's okay. It's how we move through these conversations that matters, and I'm here to support you all with that because I want to set the tone that it's okay. There's going to be conflict and it's okay to disagree, but we're going to follow it in a way by looking at these norms and get through this conflict because we need to on behalf of Sophie. And then all that while doing, like Trisha already mentioned, modeling that with confidence. So if you got to fake it in your car on the way and get there, just show up with that confidence and that warmth. And then during the meeting, so you do that, you do your opener, and and now what? And it's not necessarily the kickback. This is where it's like, oh shoot, what's going to happen? What is someone going to say? How am I going to do this? So constantly observing body language. I think it was your guys' presentation in the back. You guys it was so cool to listen to it. Yes. Thank you so much. So much body language, facial expressions, and tone. These are all things that I'm looking at. We all have different styles at our SELPA and how we facilitate, but I don't sit down, especially in the new ones, because I use my own body language, proximity. Sorry. I'm not allowed to move. Proximity to folks. I use that a lot. Just making eye contact with people, scanning the room, using that as a way to, I don't know if shift energy is the right word, but that's kind of what you'll hear me say. And then making those adjustments. And then I'm monitoring the meeting norms, like Tricia mentioned, keeping up with the agenda. I'm nudging people when necessary. I'm referencing those visuals, pausing the group for clarity, summarizing and restating, and then I'm documenting agreements in the parking lot. So some things that came up in Sophie's meeting. A staff member was being intensely peppered, politely, but intensely peppered with questions by the advocate. What the heck do you do? So it's that moment when you're that mediator, facilitator, you're in that space. That's your, do we call it that pivot when we're reflecting? It's, okay, here we go. It's go time. Like, this is not feeling safe. I can read that in the staff member that they're being peppered with questions. In this case, I chose in that moment to use body language and proximity to connect and just pause and say, so what I'm hearing your question is, and so I take that question, reframe the question, and then kick the question back to the staff member, and then the staff member can answer that question. And that's what I chose to do in that moment. But you guys all know that when you're in those spaces, you're making those choices, and in the end, you're like, I hope that was the right choice. In this case, it worked out, thank goodness. But and then for the other scenario, we had the advocate and the site leader started to get into it. So that was really fun. So they were talking over each other in disagreement. And so that is another little bit, I guess intimidating is the right word, but here's another point where it's like, what am I going to do here? So then I get body language wise, get a little bit loud, and okay, so I don't know how to do this without, I'm going to pause the room for a minute, and my tone gets a little bit louder and my body language does something a little bit brighter, and say what I'm hearing you say and what I'm hearing you say. So where do we want to go? And then I kind of calm back down a little bit. So where do we think we could go next? Like, we're here for Sophie. Where should we go next? What would be the most productive next step? So I think of it as like taking the steam out or that energy out of the space and putting it back on to me, if you will. So, and then in this case, this didn't actually happen, but there's always and what do we do if this doesn't work? What do we do if we can't move forward? And it's either potentially a break or this isn't going to, we're going to call the meeting for today and come back at another time. Never ideal, but it's true. It might need to happen in order to save this team from what they need. So they might need somebody to just call that. Okay, and then I think in final for me is just closing the meeting. So we reserve 10 minutes for closing, and we do not skip this step, especially in Sophie's case when you have a mom saying, there's all this talk and there's all these actions and agreements and folks aren't following through. We always end on time, and we reserve the 10 minutes prior, and you'll see it in our agenda template, to do the closing. We're reviewing actions and agreements. We're identifying any parking lot items. Who's going to do what by when? Okay, you said that. Okay, great. When do you think is a reasonable time for you to get that done? And then confirming that the note taker, whoever was taking notes at the meeting, has documented all of that. Offering, use tech. Take a photo of what we talked about today. And then folks can leave with that photo, and that might be a way to support them. A newer strategy is initialing the agreements, because what a cool opportunity to have everyone look at all the things we said yes to today. There's a lot of things that we're having conflict around. Look at all of these agreements. Those are yeses. Look at all those yeses. Let's initial this. The collective energy is, hey, we can do this. We're starting to say yes to things here. And then I share with the team that I'm going to follow up on those agreements. I always just let them know that, so it's not awkward when I'm like, hey, have you guys done your job? Here's a photo that I took of our actions and agreements. I share that with the case manager. Is there anything you guys need for support? Is there any follow-up you need? SELPA's here to help. So it's a way of trying to build capacity within the case managers in our district as well. And then a final note would just be always thanking the team. Thank you for leaning into conflict. Thank you for leaning into these difficult conversations with the shared goal of supporting Sophie. Maybe something prettier than that, but something to that extent of thank you for engaging in these difficult conversations, but we're all here for Sophie.
Okay, thank you. The other thing I do too is I thank them for allowing me to be in this space with them, for allowing me to be a part of the process and a part of this child's life. And so we really focus on gratitude at the end of that meeting and after the meeting has been completed. And then Lindsay was saying she's a stander. She likes to stand during facilitated. I like to sit. I bring a different perspective. I bring like, my personality is very different from Lindsay, but we do follow the same structures. Just how we present and how we work with teams is going to be based on our personalities and our lived experiences as well. And so facilitating the after the meeting, our job doesn't end when we walk out that door. Our job continues. We make sure that those action items, everyone's clear on it, whether it's taking a picture of that visual and emailing it out. I also include high quality IEPs, their action plan, which is fantastic, can be filled out during that meeting, and everyone can leave with a copy or can be emailed out. That way everyone is clear. Everyone's clear on who's responsible, by what time. When we do say, like, when do you think you can get that revised goal back to the parent? And they say, oh, the next day, I call them out on that. That doesn't feel like adequate amount of time. Right? Because I know those post IEP, like that's where we can break trust, right? Let's think about so you're not going home and working till midnight tonight. Let's think of like, how about by the end of the week? It's Monday. How about by Friday? Right? So I try to make things very realistic for them and call them out like, that's not going to give you enough time. Trust me. Following up with these teams, making sure that the trust that we've worked so hard on and the amount of hours that we've put into it, that it doesn't fall apart the second we walk out of that IEP meeting. And then, doing some email follow-up, sending that photos of the agreements. We have little postcards that we had created at our SELPA, and it says, what does it say? Gratitude. With gratitude. And we write on the back of those and we send them out to people, especially people who really showed up differently, who were vulnerable, who did hard things, right? We recognize them and we send them little cards and just expressing how thankful we are for them and participating in the hard work. And then we set little reminders in our own calendar too, because we all have crazy schedules, as I'm sure you do, so that we don't forget if we said it was all going to go out in a week, we set a reminder on our calendar to follow up with the team. Did those things get done? So we've just added that additional piece because we don't want all of that hard work to fall apart. So the other thing that we do a lot of, and Greg Abel was our coach for 5 years. And he really worked on it with us of including reflection in our process. And this is a really, really important thing for us. When we get back from facilitated IEP meetings or difficult conversations, we literally come out of our office and we all powwow in the hallway. And we talk about what happened. We talk about those pivot points. We talk about how we're feeling about it. Maybe what are some follow-up actions, some things we wish we would have done differently. And we create those margins of time so that we can do that for each other. It has been tremendous in our practice because I will say certain things and Lindsay's like, well, if you thought about what happened when? And so we use questioning with each other as a reflection. And it has been incredibly valuable. So we schedule out those margins of time for us to be able to do that work. We also like to reflect with the school team members, right? And how are you feeling after this? How did you feel that went? Do you feel like you can move forward without me at the next IEP meeting? Have we identified maybe someone who rose to the top as a leader and start passing things off to them and saying, you know, you were excellent in that meeting. I really don't feel like you need me there anymore. I will support you through the process. But how are we then building capacity with those team members so that we can step out? We don't want them to have a third sider. We want them to be able to do for themselves. Right? We don't want to always have to be in that space with them. So who are those people that have shown that they can act as a third sider within their own team? And then again, trying to gather feedback from the parents. I walk out with parents every time because I like to see how they're feeling. And then we just chit chat about our lives as we walk out, and I try to humanize the whole experience. And that was a big thing with Greg too. Like, how do we bring the human experience back to this? And how do we not make it so conflict driven and have so much angst in the whole process? And that's kind of a big thing of what we're trying to do with the reflection and the gratitude and thanking people and acknowledging people. We know it's hard and we appreciate you showing up in these spaces with us. So, Amber, I'm going to pass it over to you to talk about our journey. Oh, questions? No? Okay. Oh, here, let me.
So Lionel County SELPA, and we've adopted the model. And so to speak to the capacity piece or the hour spent, is this not working? Oh, okay. It does. So the prep time and then the post work we think is essential to building the capacity and making the time worth it. We quickly ran into a capacity issue and noticed that without the pre-work and the post-work, the cases were just they kept coming and nothing was getting resolved. And so the pre and post-work gives you the ability to identify goals, specific goals for what you're going to accomplish, and then you know when you're done, and you can sort of cycle off the case. And so like things like building people's confidence or having like that fear of the advocate, all that pre-work and post-work that builds up that confidence, like the note cards that you guys were talking about. We do emails, but it's like, okay, so they know the specific behaviors that they're working on. And so anyway, I want to say that the hours spent, and we started tracking the hours as part of our system. And yeah, it's a minimum of 2 hours, 2 to 5 hours for us. And it is, we think it's essential for building a sustainable system that has like clear beginnings and ends for each case. And yeah, I just wanted to shout out to SLO. We're like in our 5th year of applying the model, and yeah, it's working.
Thank you. I'll come right back.
I have a question. You guys talk about like you have repeat customers, as I'm sure many of us do. Do you have a stop point? Do you have a specific, hey, we're not coming back? Like figure it out. You know what I mean?
Yes, we talk about that a lot. Every year they have to renew with us. So they have to fill out a new process form, all of that. And we do think about like, okay, we've been on this case for a while. How do we elevate people within the district to be able to do that work? You know, we typically will stay on as long as we need to, but we're very conscientious about building that capacity so that we don't have to. Yeah, but there's some I've had a couple where I don't know, might not ever be off this one.
Thanks. Oh yeah. Real quick, I'm just fascinated by your process, and also just fascinated by how you slow down and you take time with the process, and really give it that the longevity of it. And my question is, sorry to go to numbers, but like, how many do you do in a year, and how many are you all, and are you doing this in a full-time capacity? Because the amount of energy and the time that you're putting in says that like it's you put all that energy around the wholeness of the process. And so I'm just curious about like what the numbers look like from your end.
Yeah, Amber can answer that, and then we have a question up here as well because we do have 2 other members.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And it's part of, you'll see when I get to the end, part of our next steps in our journey is continuing to figure out like, how do we measure impact and how do we also like, what data is the meaningful data to collect to actually understand the work that we're doing and the investment of resources that we're allocating to ADR within our SELPA. We do have, there's 5 of us total on our team. I don't do this work. I reserve myself for like the resolution space when that needs to occur. But I would say in general, we have about those 400-ish incoming calls every year that live in that conferencing land. Again, sometimes those calls are one-time calls and that's completely done. Some of those are return customers, meaning we talk to those parents 30, 40, 50 times in the year. But they don't need us to be this, right? They just need quick check-ins. They need affirmations. They need reassurance. They need, gosh, I've got this new thing going on. Help me form some questions so that I can go back and ask the right thing to my team because I'm clearly not asking the right thing. So that's all time consuming and we don't measure that very well. In terms of facilitated IEPs, I think last year as a total county, we had 29 unduplicated cases and like 38 or 39 meetings that we facilitated of those 29 cases. And then we had 14 resolution sessions ish, if you could, like, yeah, kind of quantity wise. So most of our work is in that conferencing space though. We only really move it forward if we truly feel like that's what's needed. That's the shift that we'll get this question and then I'll explain our journey, but that's the shift is we used to remember 4,000 square miles in our SELPA and our ADR continuum, other than an ombuds person, was the SELPA facilitating IEPs constant. So time was spent, windshield time, all up and down the county, driving to IEPs, doing good work, but it was not necessary work. We didn't need to be in all those spaces because we didn't have a process to say no.
Hi, I wanted to say I'm really appreciating your discussion about how to cool down these high emotions and using visual aids. And I want to share a comment for everybody who might be included. Deaf people, we are expert in using lights to set up the mood and the tone. And I don't know if you've considered using lighting. So if I go to my deaf friend's house, they have smart lights. And when the lights come up, that tells us that a friend wants us to stay and chat and whatever. As the evening goes on, as the lights start dimming, nothing is stated, but it's time for bed, right? Okay, bye-bye, right? So I grew up going to deaf school and in classrooms, our student behavior, once it started to go awry or there was fighting, we would walk over and just turn off the light. So they had to stop fighting because they couldn't see anything, right? So, we would do anything we could, lighting wise. So I might suggest considering lighting issues as cues to set the mood for these type of things.
Love that. All right, there's one back here, and then I'm going to power through the tail end of the slides.
Real quick question. On the last, I think the post-meeting activities, it said reflect on the 2 big questions. And I don't know if I missed the 2 big questions. No problem.
Yeah. So first question is, what is this situation calling me to be? And the second one is, what can I do for this team that they haven't been able to do for themselves? So it's sort of our own self-assessment if we did our job in that space.
Yeah, have we met those 2?
All right. So just to finish us off, and then we'll open it back up to any other additional questions. You've sort of heard through our conversation a little bit of our transformative journey that we've been on over the last 6 years, but it's really been about building capacity both in ourselves and in others, parents, local agencies, and our school districts, with a true focus on prevention. We know that if we can get in and build foundational skills and knowledge early enough, not that we're going to mitigate conflict, but we can at least maybe dampen the impact of conflict or the high level intensity of it. And then that through line of reflection and the next steps and opportunities for us. So this is our journey. Really, we sort of look at the COVID time as a pivot time for us. And that's because, one, there was lots of opportunity, lots of conflict that occurred during COVID because of just unknowns and all the things that were happening in terms of trying to access education for our students with disabilities. But also in the state of California, we had an opportunity and we had an influx of one-time dollars from the California Department of Education, specifically earmarked for ADR. So it really allowed us to do some really cool work within the state around expanding our ADR continuums. In our SELPA specifically, we were one of the original recipients of the ADR grant at the state. So it is work that has been truly ingrained in the culture of the SELPA for a very long period of time. We had an ombuds model, and really the impetus of our transition was because that person left. They retired from the gig, and we couldn't find a replacement. We went through a couple people, but we couldn't find a replacement that felt like they were the right fit for both for our families and our school districts and the culture of our SELPA. So it allowed us this moment in time to say, oh, maybe we need to do things a little bit differently. We are a huge continuous improvement science county. So we lean into this idea around the theoretical and scientific concepts of improvement in everything that we do. And so you see this sort of iterative work around improvement that we do. We expanded our continuum. We really looked at proactive and prevention strategies. We found these two really amazing guys, Greg Abel and Carlo Rossi, 5 years ago. And they, like Tricia had shared, were really, truly just incredibly impactful in how we were able to transform the work that we did. And then really importantly is we have a collective commitment from our county superintendents, all 14 of them, from our special ed directors, on the fiscal side, from our CBOs, that this is the work they want their SELPA to be doing. And so there's never a question around like, how are you spending your special education dollars? For us, this is like, they're like, thank you. I report back to them every single month the data around how we're trying to demonstrate impact around ADR, and they're all in on this being priority work for us. And so it makes that a lot easier for us to continue to lean in and spend our time this way. But for us, it's about prevention, really. So for prevention for us, meaning we had to build capacity of everybody for things that didn't necessarily feel like it was aligned to, not aligned to ADR, but like a little bit not linearly connected to ADR. Like we had some poor practices happening around special education implementation. Like we had to fix it. We have to fix that. We have to work on that. So spending time really working with all of our educators around best practices, spending time building the capacity of our parents to better understand the special ed process so that they can be empowered when they come to the table. So we do that through virtual lunchtime learning series with our parents, and we record them and we put them on our website so that they're always available. How can we help you better understand special education? We also have shifted to this model around online learning for our educators. So post-COVID, you can't get subs anymore. You can't get teachers out of the classroom, not because districts aren't committed to that, because there's literally no substitutes to backfill teachers. And so we really had to be more innovative and creative in how we brought professional learning opportunities to people within our county. So we shifted to an on-demand learning module. We spend lots of time putting together presentations, recording ourselves, building out packages, and pushing it out to our school districts and saying, when the time is right for you and you have your staff and your professional learning, here's a whole series for the general education teacher to understand special education. Here's a whole series for site principals to understand special education. So we've really sort of broken down and provided high quality professional learning for a variety of educational roles. We send out monthly ADR tips to as many educators as we have listservs for. So for our county, it's about 800 people every month get a one-page ADR monthly tip. It's available on our website as well. But again, we're trying to like just infuse the system with best practices that take less than 5 minutes to digest. If we give you an hour and ask you that, you're not going to go watch a 1-hour webinar of us talking, but you may read an email that has 5 minutes of what we believe is the best strategies and tips that we want you to implement right away. We've developed ADR community of practices. We bring people together to share and learn and reflect and really live in this space so they feel more comfortable and confident as team members, as leaders, as third-siders. So again, that they don't always feel like they need us to be able to come and do that work on their behalf, but that they can start doing that work themselves. For prevention, also, we spent a lot of time on our branding, which feels a little weird, like that doesn't have anything to do with ADR. But for us, our goal was to build an identity that the SELPA conveyed openness, trust, partnership, and expertise. We wanted not just our school districts, they know who we are. We wanted our parents and our community agencies to feel like they knew who we were, what we did, and to be confident and trusting that they could partner with us, and that yes, we're not neutral by any means, but that they could trust us in advocating on behalf of their child. And so we used our logo, of course. We started branding, consistent colors, consistent styles. We started using social media. We redid our entire website. We have consistent messaging everywhere. Everywhere that we go and anything that we do, it all looks the same. So we actually have brand identity now, and I think it's one of the things that's really helpful in people understanding who we are and what we do. And you'll see here's sort of like examples of what that looks like. It's all the style is very same. The color palette is all very the same. And we really just keep it consistent. So when you see something from us, you're like, oh yeah, that's Slow SELPA. And this is also a big thing that we're very proud of, is we meet monthly with our local community partners. And we do that from the SELPA because we want to know what they do. We want them to know what we do, and we want to have good partnership in the middle so that we're serving the same people, right? They call them clients, we call them students, but at the end of the day, it's our students and our families that are mutually being served across from us. And so we meet with them every single month. And I will say, since we've started doing this, they're great referrers to us. The families go there first. The families go to regional centers for their early start services. The families go to the Department of Social Services because they're getting supports that way. And they're going to our parent empowerment centers, and they're helping funnel parents to us so that we can support them through the IEP process through their conflicts. These are a variety of logos that are local context for us, of course, but we meet with our court-appointed special advocates, the Department of Rehabilitation. We're meeting with probation. We're meeting with the Department of Social Services. We're meeting with behavioral health. We're meeting with our local agencies that are very specific to our county, but huge investment of our time, but has really paid off for the more efficient and effective resources for our families to access in the long run. So I shared that we love improvement, and it is an iterative journey for us. And so these are the questions we grapple with each and every day as a team. Is our continuum the right model of support for our families and for our schools? How do we create appropriate boundaries to build the capacity and independence? There was the question that said, do you phase people out? Like, do you say no eventually? We don't know how to do that, but we talk about it because yes, we've had families for 4 years. And, at the end of the day, our attitude and mantra is like, if they need us, they need us. And if we're helping them, then we're going to stay in that space. But we've, put some processes in place where you have to renew and those sorts of things. But we haven't yet drawn lines. We just figure out how to create capacity within ourselves, meaning that other things take the back burner. How do we effectively transition off cases? How do we identify other third-siders? How do we ourselves continue to grow, learn, and adjust? Like, if we're going to really be doing this on behalf of our teams, we have to continue to be sponges in this field and to feel like we are competent and confident to walk into those spaces and help people. How do we effectively measure the impact of our efforts? What is meaningful data collection? Like, that's really hard. What does that truly look like? And this is a big one for us. How can we learn more about OAH filings in our county that don't use SELPA? We don't have a ton of them, but the ones that do come in through OAH are not cases that come through our office, exhaust us, and then go file. They're just cases that get filed on. So we still have this gap here, and I don't know that we'll ever be able to close that, but it is a gap that we're constantly thinking about. Like, we're still missing the mark in terms of awareness maybe around supporting families at lower levels. And reflection is big. Trisha talked about this, how we do it after the meetings, but we're constantly doing it. We do it with our teams when we're involved in cases. We do it with our parents when we're involved in cases. We do it with others around the state. We're the region lead for ADR in our area, so we're connected to all the region leads within our state. We have our consulting contracts with ADR to make, with our consultants to make ourselves better. And then we have hallway chats all the time, but we have structure within our SELPA where we have bi-monthly 1-hour meetings solely set aside for our team to just talk ADR. And we're not talking nitty-gritty cases at that point. We're talking about the effectiveness of our continuum so that we can ever be improving and making sure that we're meeting the needs of our local community. And this is my last slide, but in our journey, but our next steps, parent ambassadors, we want a program. We have wonderful parents in our community advisory committee, but we want to elevate and create some sort of parent ambassador program locally so that when parents call, we can truly say, we've got another parent we can connect you with who's, has the same experiences as you do, who has some advice to give you. We're doing that right now, but we want parents to join our team. We continually grapple with how do we build the capacity of others to be able to join us in this work, that it's not just a SELPA thing, or it shouldn't be. And then lastly, how do we build working relationships with our advocates and our parent attorneys within our area? Because it's really important. Like, they are at the table oftentimes, they are representing families and our students. And so how do we have more, maybe trust? We aim for trust, but how do we have relationships? How do we have transparent processes? And how do we have effective communication in those spaces? Because if we're all at the table together, how can we more collaboratively work together towards positive outcomes for our kids? I think we've said this a few times, but truly, truly special thanks to these two guys up here. They have been transformative to us in more ways than we could ever thank them for, both personally and professionally, and within our continuum. And we'll forever continue to be inspired by Greg and keep him alive in our space. And we often get to have coffee with Carlos still. He's pretty specific to California, but they like to call themselves the good old dudes in our state. And so we will just continue to honor them in the work as we move forward. And then lastly, if you want any of we created a QR code. There's a Google folder with all sorts of resources in addition to the slides, if you'd like any of that. But just thank you so much for being here and listening to our journey.
Thank you. Questions?
Oh, and fill out your survey, please.
I had a quick question. My SELPA's system is very similar to yours. And one thing we struggle with is like the data that's been presented at the conference is like, we have these complaints and OH cases. That's the problem statement, right? And our system, we've invested a lot of time and energy to improve practices and training, but we're seeing still an increase in OH cases and complaints. Have you done an analysis before and after to see about your OH at your SELPA?
So I present OAH filings every single month, and we have 10 years of data that we look at, and we range anywhere between 10 to 15 filings a year historically over the last 10 years. So regardless of our investment in this space, that has remained relatively stable. And so we just don't put a lot of emphasis on it. Truthfully, we present all this other data where we feel like is more impactful of the work.
It's not solving the problem that they presented the data on, which I think is a flaw in the way you look at 85.
Yeah, I agree. Totally agree. Thank you. Yeah.